As we close out the year, I wanted to take a moment to look back at where we were just 12 months ago, before Donald Trump took office, before the chaos was fully unleashed, and before we knew just how far things could slide. Last December, I sat down with the great George Conway to talk about our country at the time. We spoke about the warning signs of Trump's authoritarian behavior, the legal guardrails that he was already pushing against, and the already very real risks to American democracy. Listening back then, it's hard not to feel that chill of recognition. I mean, literally, so much of what we feared didn't just happen, it accelerated. I mean, the conversation is truly a reminder of how quickly norms can collapse, how badly things can go wrong, and why speaking out early still matters. Alrighty, George Conway, welcome back to Mea Culpa. Good to see you, my friend. Lots going on. I don't have to tell you that. Lots going on, lots to talk about, not a lot of time. So I want to start with something that affects both you and me, because reports are indicating that President-elect Trump has compiled an enemies list, targeting individuals such as yourself and myself, including President Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and many other people. How does this align with authoritarian tendencies observed by other global leaders? And what precedent does it set for American democracy?
Well, I mean, it's consistent with the kind of behavior that you expect from a narcissistic sociopath who is naturally has authoritarian tendencies. They think everything belongs to them, that everything is for their use, that the government belongs to him, that everything that the government can do should be done on his behalf. And if he doesn't like people, well, therefore the government should go after those people. And the government should, leave him alone. And the government belongs to him, like his generals. Remember how he used to always talk about his generals? Well, this is going to, he's going to look at it that this is his Justice Department. It's for him. It's the United States of America and the executive branch are his plaything as of January 20th at noon. That's the way he views it in his own head. The same way he thinks, he thinks everything belongs to him, that he has the right to everything. And he knows no boundaries, as you can attest better than I.
Yeah, well, look.
And obviously it's bad for the country because we need to have a president who's running the country for the country's sake and not for his own. But the people chose. This is what they chose this time, and it's not great.
You see, but yet I blame Democrats in many respects I do. When Joe Biden was running and then followed by Kamala Harris taking over as the nominee for the Democratic Party, nobody talked about this specific issue with precision. They mentioned it, that Donald Trump is an authoritarian. They said all these things. But you know what they failed to acknowledge? You know what they failed to really smash home? Something you and I have spoken about many, many times. It's not as if this didn't happen going back into 2018, right, when he first took office as president number 45. They unconstitutionally remanded me off of a counterfeit document, making me the first political prisoner held by this country because I refused to waive my First Amendment constitutional right. And only thanks to Judge Alvin K. Hellerstein did I ultimately get out. But this is not a new play in the Trump playbook. It's just a play that's going to end up now taking place more and more and affecting more and more Americans. Something that I've been yelling about since day number one, that I never, ever, ever wanted to see happen again in this country. But yet nobody really talked about it. Kamala Harris didn't bring it up once. Joe Biden didn't bring it up once. Mistake.
Well, I'm gonna just take a step back there. Biden wasn't as sharp on that, I think, as he could have been earlier on. I mean, I think a couple of times he talked about Trump's tendencies, but not that specifically. I agree with you. Kamala Harris did talk about the fact that Trump wants to use the government as his own instrument of vengeance, and she wants to use the government for the people.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think she did point that out on numerous occasions. And I do think it fell upon deaf ears to a lot of people because they kind of discount all political rhetoric. And I mean, your case is a great example of what he has done. But people, I have to say, and it's disappointing to me, people don't listen to the details. And they discount rhetoric, that they think everybody is engaging in the same amount of rhetoric and same kind of blowhardism. And that's sort of why they kind of accept Trump and discount his rhetoric. And then they kind of discount everything that's said about him. They don't really get it because they're not really tuned in and they haven't been paying attention. And that's really it's a real societal problem that we don't, people don't really care enough to learn about what's happening in the real world. They choose, they scroll on their TikToks and Facebook feeds, and they kind of get news occasionally, but that's distorted or warped or maybe appeals to their own predilections. And, I don't think that the message was lost for, and at least on Vice President Harris's part, her inability or unwillingness to express it. I just think that people have to see the negative effects of it, and people have to learn the hard way. And I think a lot of people are going to learn the hard way when they see that the government is being run for not their behalf, but on behalf of people who want to get rich off of the government and people who want to punish others for their own flaws and to punish to get even with other people. So I'm a little more forgiving, I think, of the Democrats than you are on this, even though I'm not a Democrat.
I am,
but I am actually. Well, maybe that gives you more standing to be critical. But I do think it's unfortunate that people really didn't tune into that.
But you see, it's really the messaging that was done wrong. So in other words, when I would hear Kamala Harris say it, I try to reach out to her people. It's not a question of a hypothetical, because that's how they always pose the question. Donald Trump, wants to be a authoritarian. Donald Trump might and could use the Department of Justice to go against his critics. No. Donald Trump will do it. Why? Because he did it before. It's not new. It's just a different play in his playbook. It's a more enhanced play in his playbook. You see, he realized that as the direct result of Alvin Hellerstein's granting of my habeas corpus petition to be released, now you need to, like a football coach, you need to tweak the play. Right? Maybe you don't, maybe you don't run it left, you run it right. In that way you have a bigger open field. I don't know, but they missed the whole point. You see, I'm factually accurate in the fact that it happened to me. And you don't need to take Michael Cohen's word for it. Take Alvin Hellerstein's word for it when he talked about Bill Barr and under the Trump administration being retaliatory and saying it's the first time in his entire career, it's like spanning more than 30 years on the federal bench, that he's ever seen anything this despicable. And yet they didn't want to use it. You see, had they used it in the proper way, I think that at least some people might have gotten the message that this is really wrong. And under his administration, it's not as if, like Trump said, the Biden administration is weaponizing the DOJ against him. It was actually his administration that weaponized the DOJ against critics and enemies.
Well, I'm certainly sympathetic toward your view, and I do think that your case deserved more attention than it got. But I'll say that the people who get that level of detail and would focus on your case in particular are people who already get it. And the people who are the marginal voters, if you will, the swing voters in the swing states, they don't absorb that degree of detail. They don't know what a United States district judge is. And, I think that that's the difficulty that you face in political messaging, is that you are not just appealing to one kind of person. You're appealing to millions of people who fit different levels of knowledge, intellect, education, interest, and an understanding of what the government is for, and how it can be used and misused. So, it's not an easy thing. I do give Vice President Harris a lot of credit for speaking out and basically calling him out for his criminality and the fact that she was a prosecutor. I think she did the best she could, keeping at the level of generality that you need to keep in an election campaign, where people, they don't get into the level of detail that you or I or the viewers of this podcast do.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because now you have people like Kash Patel, who's Trump's nominee for FBI director. The guy in a book identified 60 individuals that he deems part of the executive branch deep state, which critics are now dubbing his enemies list. Question I
Well,
want
that's
to ask
exactly what
you
it is. I mean, they don't have to dub it. I mean, that really
right.
is. It's clear
it is.
what it is.
It is his enemies list, sure.
Right, absolutely.
So my question is to you, my question is, what legal or ethical consequences could arise from such public vendettas against political opponents and private citizens?
Well, look, I think the problem is that this is the classic who's watching the watchman problem. I mean, if the the person to investigate this, potentially criminal use of the criminal justice system against the enemies of people who happen to be in government service, if those people are the people who are engaging in those bad acts, there's no one to watch the watchman. And that's the big problem here. That's the craziness of it all, that people like Kash Patel and we saw the release of the House Ethics Committee report on Matt Gaetz. I mean, Matt Gaetz, it would be one thing if, there are some people who are very, very talented and very, very experienced, who could have been prosecutors and whatnot, who go into government service, and then something comes out about a fault that they had, or a bad day that they had, or a bad incident in their home life, or something. You get these scandals that come up when people are vetted for high public office, and here you have this just outright rampant misbehavior with a man who had zero qualifications to be attorney general, absolutely none. I mean, he never was even not only was he not a prosecutor, he was never even a litigator. He spent like a year in a law firm. He did, I know paralegals in New York City who've done more legal work or show more skill than Matt Gaetz did. And that just shows you that Trump doesn't care about any of that. He only cares about loyalty. He only cares about whether somebody is going to do his bidding, and is someone motivated to do his bidding. And that's what Kash Patel is all about.
It's actually what many of them are all about.
Oh, absolutely.
Let me ask you this then, because President Biden is reportedly considering issuing preemptive pardons for individuals like yourself, myself, and many, many others who might be unjustly targeted by this incoming administration. Is this legally and politically viable? And what precedent do you think that it'll set for future administrations, taking into consideration that he issued commutations on, 37 federal inmates who were slated for execution? He issued commutations, and Trump is already talking about trying to figure out how to put it back.
Yeah. Well, I think it's going to be a very difficult thing for. In principle, the president could craft a pardon announcement, a pardon proclamation that's very broad, but how you draw, unless you're naming specific names, and I don't think
Gotta name them. Gotta name
Well,
them.
not necessarily. I mean, that's not necessarily true. I mean, I think there's a lot of discussion about what the Biden administration might do is patterned after is invoking the precedent of the 1977 and Jimmy Carter amnesty given to people who failed to comply with their selective service requirements during the Vietnam War, and also with there was some low-level marijuana use pardons that were issued by President Biden early in his term. I think actually it would make more sense to pardon specific individuals that might be subject to persecution if under some circumstances. But I don't know how you make that list.
The list is already made. By the way, the list is already made.
Look, I mean, let me go back to the more general problem I have with it which is I just, people who haven't done anything wrong shouldn't receive or take pardons. That's my problem. But I do understand the plight of people like yourself, Olivia Troy, a lot of names have been thrown about, of people who just could get sucked into some ridiculous investigation. I think the best course there is that these investigations have to be dealt with on the merits, and I think people have to band together to support people who've done nothing wrong and have simply just stood up for what is right.
I mean, Cassidy Hutchinson's talking,
Yeah,
Alyssa Farah Griffin. I mean, there's 100 different names. Yeah. Let me tell you where the problem comes in with something like that. First and foremost, he gave his son a pardon. Well, I'm somebody's son too. You're somebody's son also. Alyssa Farah, Cassidy Hutchinson, Olivia Troy, so many others are daughters of somebody. You can't take, I get it. You got to worry about your kids, but technically to the president, we're all supposed to be his children, right? And until you've been sued by Trump, as I have, all right, for $500 million in the Southern District of Florida, which he ultimately dismissed. He abandoned the case about 3 days or so before he was to sit for depositions, court-ordered depositions. It cost me over $300,000 to defend that case, a $500 million action against you. Number one, it completely takes over your life. Two, it makes you sick to your stomach because you never know what can happen in any lawsuit. Three, you're throwing money out that you just don't have, and you're asking people to help you, which many people did, and I'm thankful for that, but it costs you money. What happens to everybody else? We don't have the Elon Musk in the Democratic Party that's willing to put up a George Conway firm so that everybody can be protected legally. And by the way, I didn't ask to be a witness. I didn't ask going back into 2017 when I was subpoenaed by the Senate Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. My biggest mistake is that I actually showed up and that I didn't do what everybody else did and say, go fuck yourselves. I'm not going. I'm not doing it. What are you going to do? Give me 100 days in jail like they did for Navarro? I did almost half of that in solitary confinement.
Yeah, look, I mean, again, obviously the pardons can't help with civil litigation, so that's a separate issue, and he's going to do that, and they don't necessarily help with tax investigations that could, where civil penalties are being sought. So I mean, there's a limit to what the outgoing president can do to help potential victims of retribution in the next administration. I think at the end of the day, we're going to have to rely on the courts. We're going to have to rely on people who are willing to help people who are being persecuted in the manner that we anticipate they may be, just the way people help you. And I know that is not a satisfactory answer for somebody whose life is turned upside down by this kind of retributive action by the government or people in government. But I think that's ultimately where the action is going to be, because I don't think I don't think that we're going to see a blanket pardon of people, and I think a lot of people will reject a blanket pardon or a pardon that names them because they simply have done nothing wrong.
If so, what? As far as listen, they can
Yeah,
reject whatever they want. I'm sure there's plenty of us that would say, we would accept. I mean, the Guardian, as an example, is reporting.
Yeah.
What's that?
No, I would not. I would not accept a pardon. So I've done nothing wrong, and I will absolutely.
I would force you to.
No,
I would come to DC and I'd force you just keep it in your pocket and keep it there.
No.
I mean, because like the Guardian is reporting that people like Adam Schiff, Liz Cheney, Nancy Pelosi, to name just a few, right, are people who are going to get.
Let me just say, I mean,
the incoming administration.
They may or they may not, because you have to say, I mean, it's a lot of people on that list.
Yeah.
Okay. And there are a lot of people on the list who are going to fight back and can fight back and can join together with others to fight back. And again, that's what I think has to be done at the end of the day. If these
let me just say this to you, George, as somebody that's been on that retribution side as well, that $500 million lawsuit, as ridiculous as it was, every legal scholar that read that complaint turned around and said the lawyer should be sanctioned for filing such a frivolous case.
And the lawyer should be sanctioned who filed that lawsuit against Ann Seltzer, the pollster for the Des Moines Register. And I think there will be some sanctions at the end of the day. I mean, Alina Habba had to pay sanctions. And I think that and I think that's all fair, and I think that's the way to fight back, actually.
Yeah, well, until it makes
we have a disagreement on that, but we know what we have a difference in philosophy there. But I understand, I greatly, as you know, sympathize where you're coming from.
I'm just coming from a guy who actually has been abused by the system, by the DOJ, time and time and time again. But let me ask you this then, because considering the unprecedented nature of these preemptive pardons or pardons altogether to protect, individuals from potential retribution, how do you think this compares to historical uses of the pardon power in the United States? Remembering that when Trump left office in 2020, there's all sorts of stories and allegations that it was a pay for play. I mean, there's stories galore. New York Times reported it over and over and over again that there are individuals who paid for their pardons. How does this compare?
I think you have to look at everything pardon by pardon. I mean, there have always been some pardons that sort of raised hackles and raised eyebrows at the end of an administration. That includes the Hunter Biden pardon. That includes the Mark Rich pardon at the end of the Clinton administration. It includes a number of the pardons that former president and soon to be president again Trump issued in 2020 and 2021. So I don't think you can compare them, because I think I could compare that to what we are talking about the President Biden doing on the way out, because those pardons were for people who had already done something and also usually found to have done something. I mean, Mark Rich was a fugitive from justice. Hunter Biden had a conviction. The difference would be the pardons that we're talking about here are be preemptive pardons. So again, for people who probably have done nothing, will likely have done nothing wrong. And I don't know that one justifies the other, but I will agree with you that it's it's not abusive in the same way that a pardon of a rich friend or somebody who is a rich contributor to a campaign, or a friend of the Democratic Party like Mark Rich was, or a son like Hunter Biden was. Although those are peculiar circumstances there, and I kind of cut a little slack for President Biden there. I don't think you can. I think it's an apples and oranges comparison, and I don't know that all those bad pardons justify ones that might be perceived as better.
Because, here on Mea Culpa, I had, for example, Lev Parnas on a couple of times. And
He's a
during
character.
the time that he is a character, he's a great dude. But what ultimately happened is here on the show, he explained that during the time where Trump was leaving, Rudy Giuliani came to him, and this is from, again, Lev's mouth, that Giuliani came to him and said, "Hey, Lev, if you know anybody that needs a pardon, have them reach out to me." They, according to Lev, were selling pardons. I mean, that's just not normal behavior. In fact, to make matters even worse, they took the whole thing out of the hands of the pardon.
The pardon attorney at the DOJ.
It was
Yes,
given directly. Jared Kushner took the whole thing over.
Yeah. And of course, his father gets a pardon.
Well, yeah, I mean, who wouldn't do it for dear old dad, right?
Right.
I mean, the point is here, Lev was saying that Rudy was asking him to go find, people who may need a pardon.
You get no argument from me that Rudy Giuliani's a sleazeball and that the pardon power was greatly abused at the end of President Trump's last term. So you get no argument there from me.
Well, then
it was outrageous. I agree.
Then I guess we're talking about the historical
and the pardon
power
of Manafort and the pardon of Stone, or the commutation of Stone's sentence. And I mean, there were just so many bad things that happened. And then we're going to see probably on January 20th at like 12:05 p.m. right after he takes the oath of office and gives his speech. Maybe 15 minutes later, he's going to sign these pardons for all the January 6ers. I have no doubt he's going to do that. He's promised to do that. And that's going to be, those people committed real crimes on his behalf. And that will be, I think, the most abusive use of the pardon power in history, given that he incited an insurrection to overthrow the Constitution and use those people to do it.
And interestingly enough, he'll probably get accolades by his MAGA supporters and the Republican Party for doing the right thing. Right? I mean, it's not
we live in a world where everything's upside down in that regard. Yes. So I agree with you there.
So let's jump back to obviously the ethics report on Representative Matt Gaetz that came to light.
I confess, Michael, I didn't actually read the report. I went straight to the exhibits.
Oh, you did? So I read
the emails and texts. The text. So there's something. I mean, whoa.
I mean, I read it twice. There are 42 pages in total.
Yeah.
Which
I like looking at the emails. I mean, the text. That's crazy stuff.
Yeah, that it is. It highlights the allegations of a whole slew of misconduct here.
Yeah,
but the real question
I'm amazed. I'm amazed that how Speaker Johnson could justify withholding that report is just this holy Christian. I mean, the whole thing is just unfathomable. But anyway.
So my question to you that I want to ask you is, how does this development affect the internal cohesion and public perception of the Republican Party? You think it's making anybody, take a look at them in a different way, especially in light of what you just brought up? How does Mike Johnson, a guy who is supposedly holier than thou, turn around and accept this sort of report and try to hide it, despite the fact you and I may disagree on this as well? I actually don't think they should have released the report at all.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. That's an interesting point of discussion. Look, I just think one of the things that we are seeing in the Trump era, and it's certainly true of Trump himself, but it's also true of the people who are enabling him, is there is no bottom. There is no end to the degree to which they corrupt themselves or they behave in a craven fashion. And the fact that Matt Gaetz was nominated or proposed to be nominated, and that this report, I mean, and that he even it's absurd. It's just absurd. There's no end to the misbehavior here, and I don't know. Words escape me on how to describe it, because I guarantee you there'll be something worse down the line.
So let me ask you this then, all right? Because as I was reading this report, and again, I still don't believe that they should have released it. The report was actually designed to hold him accountable to the House Ethics Committee
Right.
as a member of Congress when he stepped away.
Yeah.
Technically, the way I see it, the report is moot. It's not supposed, other than the salacious, the salaciousness of it and the fact that it appeals to our prurient, interests and so on. Because we're living in like a Kardashian country right now, where the dirtier it is, the happier everybody is in order to read it and talk about it and so on. What I think they should have done with it, if in fact the report is accurate in all of the 15 witnesses that came forth and the thousands of documents that supported the response by the ethics committee, which, by the way, I want to remind my listeners and my viewers here that it was bipartisan, that in order for it to be released, it was Republican and Democrat that released this report.
Quite
My
true.
feeling is there was no point in releasing it to us, the public. Why not release it to the Attorney General? Why not release it to the state Attorney General of Florida, which would have the jurisdiction over this case?
Well, that's
what
sort of,
I think that they should have done,
well,
instead of turning around and doing this.
I think that's a valid point, that law enforcement should have been given a copy of the report. On the other hand, this ethics investigation probably should have, I think it did. I don't know the facts of how they collected their information, tracked a long-standing Justice Department investigation of Gates that ultimately did not result in a prosecution of Gates for whatever reason, because I don't know, but it's said that maybe some of the witnesses would not have been credible enough to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. But your point is well taken. And I think another point that kind of relates to your point would be well taken as well, is that imagine knowing that this report is on its way and has probably been drafted and is about to be released, and knowing based upon the public record that there are probably some bad details in there. Imagine having the gall to not nominate this man, notwithstanding the existence of that report, and notwithstanding the fact that you, the president-elect of the United States, Donald Trump, did not even bother to ask what was in it or what might be in it. That's a real point to be made.
Can I give a little twist to that, like a New York City pretzel? All right. I actually don't hold Donald Trump accountable for that. You know Donald for many, many years. In fact, George, I know you and Kellyanne longer than I actually know Donald. Right, going back to our earliest days. Let me be very clear about something. You know as well as I that Donald didn't look through any of this. He wasn't involved in the vetting or anything. I blame the transition team. I think the transition team that's doing this right now. Wait, hear me on it. Right, I blame the transition team in the fact that they're giving him really shit advice. That what they're doing is, this happened, by the way, in 2017, right after the win in 2017, there was no transition book. I had been pushing for the transition book weeks before, but nobody wanted to do it. Donald didn't want to do it. So the day after the win, what ends up happening? Jared starts running around and handing out big, gigantic, thick, documents that have all the names of these positions that are open, with lines underneath it saying, fill in whoever you think should be ambassador to the Court of St. James, or the ambassador to Mexico, or the chief of staff for the Department of Defense, the secretary of Veterans Affairs, who, by the way, I put in, as well as Woody Johnson for ambassador. And, interestingly enough, this is the same thing that they're doing now. They're all running around like a bunch of chickens without heads, enjoying making TikTok and videos of their massive win, doing the YMCA jerk-off dance, I mean, that's exactly what's going on here, right? They look like when they start doing it, they look like they're jerking off a giraffe, right? It's the truth.
Oh
So
my!
you sit there.
That image, I can't.
Well, now
Michael,
you'll see it every
image.
single time. I'm not joking here. This is absolutely ridiculous. All right. It's the transition team that's supposed to be putting in competent people.
Okay.
Otherwise, who needs them?
I'm not going to defend. I will not defend the transition team. But you know Donald Trump very well, and you can't do anything in an organized fashion with him. And apparently, according to the press reports I read, the way that the Matt Gaetz thing happened is that Boris Epstein was in the cabin of the plane alone with Trump and Gates and talked Trump into it when Susie Wiles was, in another part of the airplane, didn't know anything about it. Okay. It's Donald Trump just decides arbitrarily and very impulsively to make decisions without sufficient factual information, without caring about having sufficient factual information, and creates chaos in his own transition. And it's whoever talks to him last, who can have the most influence at any given moment. And then, he's just incredibly impulsive. And you can't have that. There's no way there would ever be a coherent, cohesive transition process with him in charge. There's never going to be a coherent, cohesive presidency, a functional presidency with him in charge. And that's one of the reasons that, with that long list of enemies that we were talking about earlier, he's not going to do very well with that long list because it's way too long. And he's going to, he's like a fire hose. He's going to go one way or the other and just all over the place.
But you see, I remember, George, in 2017 when the transition team, which was at one point run again by Jared because Ivanka set him up to be the secretary of everything. I do remember that there was a whole slew of individuals and they were actually doing as much vetting as they possibly could. Now, everybody knew about these allegations regarding Matt Gaetz. So while Trump, and you're right, would turn around, the guy who owns the ear last owns the brain, right? What ultimately
would
happen
to
is somebody,
case, I think.
Well, especially Boris. I mean, Boris is a fucking clown, no matter how you want to slice it, right? He just is. I mean, I know Boris when he was we used to call him a lapdog, that all he wanted to do was just be seen by Trump. Okay, now you're being seen by Trump. But my understanding is Trump hasn't even offered him anything yet, as far as in the administration. Whether he wants it or not, I don't know. But how could you take somebody like Matt Gaetz seriously for attorney general when he just doesn't fit even one of the boxes? Like, okay, you may not like Pam Bondi, right? You may not think
but she was a prosecutor. She was elected in public office. She's a she's a
real player.
She's a real person who has, at least on paper, the credentials of a potential attorney general. I mean, Janet Reno was district attorney in Miami. Okay, they actually, there's, but I have issues with Pam Bondi, but she was actually a prosecutor.
Right, and people like Marco Rubio,
attorney general of a state. Absolutely,
exactly.
Yeah.
I just think that this was
Matt Gaetz, who worked at a law firm for about 6 months.
That's why I turned around.
His experience was being investigated for sleeping and giving drugs to 17-year-olds. I mean,
but that's why I say I blame the transition team. Now, let me ask you this.
Look, I mean, everything flows from him. Okay, all the chaos, all the lunacy flows from him. I mean, I think Susie Wiles, left to her own devices, I don't know her, but she wouldn't have picked Matt Gaetz. But you've got this guy, and this guy is going to do what he's going to do. And if you tell him not to do things, sometimes he's going to do them just to show you that he can do them. He's completely woo. And I mean, I don't know what else to say about him.
So let me ask you this, because again, here's another thing that's now occupying the news. Trump made some recent comments about taking back the Panama Canal. This really raised a ton of eyebrows. If I'm not mistaken, Wasn't the treaty done like in 1999? I mean, you're talking about almost 25 years ago that the canal was turned over to Panama.
Yeah, the canal
But
was turned over, I think, in the 90s, as you say. I don't remember the precise date. The treaty it was voted on in the 1970s under the Carter administration. It was controversial at the time because many people felt that the United States had built this canal, although, and it should keep the canal. And then, but ultimately the decision was made, and it is, smack in the middle of Panama. It bisects Panama. It's their country. And, as long as people have free access to it, not free access, but international, fair international access to it, which is, I think, provided for in the treaty. Why we'd want to upset that apple cart, and what basis we have to do it, other than brute force and intimidation, I don't see.
My understanding is that, again, somebody's whispering in his ear that China is in cahoots with Panama, that there's all these tariffs in terms of the shipping lanes going through, they're charging X amount of dollars, and that the United States is getting ripped off by Panama. To me, it says a couple of things. First and foremost, I don't think that whoever's feeding him this information has any comprehension about or understanding of historical international agreements and foreign policy. I think they've just thrown that to the wind and say, we're the United States, we're bigger than you, we're stronger than you, and we can do whatever we want. But there's also a belief that one of the reasons that Trump is so angry at Panama is because they brought an action against him for failing to pay. They held him where 12.5%, he had a Trump Tower in Panama that they pulled the name off of the building, but that based upon the management agreement, they were supposed to pay taxes of 12.5% as per the agreement to the Panamanian government. They never did that. And now the new owner is stuck with millions of dollars in fines and this and that. And so because it got out there, that Trump is angry at Panama.
Who's to say? I mean, he has gripes, and he doesn't like windmills because whatever. He's got problems with the Scottish government. He's got problems with everybody, and you can't always sort out the narcissistic motivations that are floating around randomly in his head. I will say that, we're seeing a very interesting kind of parallel to other authoritarians in the kind of expansionist acquisitiveness that he seems to be expressing favor for, talking about Canada becoming the 51st state and referring to the Prime Minister of Canada as Governor Trudeau, talking about taking Greenland from the Kingdom of Denmark, and this bit with the Panama Canal. I mean, it just seems to be unrestrained megalomania that is driving him, and there may be some lesser motivations involved, like, as you say, this bit with the Panamanian Trump property. But I think there's also a big thing going on, that he is so consumed with his visions of grandeur that he wants to now become a conqueror, and exert his power elsewhere in the world. I mean, it's almost Putin-esque, if you will.
Yeah. Let me ask you, do you think that there's a domestic political strategy behind these comments regarding the Panama Canal? Because at this recent speech that he gave in Arizona,
right,
when he brought this up, the crowd went fucking wild.
Well,
I couldn't believe it. They were going wild.
They go fucking wild about a lot of what he says. I don't, anytime I have this reflex action that occurs anytime somebody utters a question or makes a declarative statement that contains a sentence that has both the words Trump and strategy in it. I don't think the man has any strategy at all in him, and he's capable of strategy. I think he's pure impulsiveness, pure. He has this reptilian uh, instinct of taking more than he's entitled to, grabbing more than he should have, asserting more authority or wisdom or power or intelligence or anything or money than he actually has or deserves. And I think this expansionist rhetoric referring to Panama and Greenland and Canada, and I mean, we're probably going to hear more about something else. Maybe it'll be about the
Mexico.
Caribbean next.
Mexico.
Yeah, Mexico. That's just what he does. And I think people who find that that bravura entertaining or appealing, that kind of authoritarian, that kind of of strongman kind of attitude appealing, are going to react positively to that, and that is his base. But I don't think it's a strategy. I think it's just a marrying up of his base instincts with their base instincts, the base's base instincts, if you will. So I don't think it's strategy, but I do think it's sort of a symbiosis of a sort, where his bad tendencies reinforce the bad tendencies of others, and then those reinforce his bad tendencies. It's a vicious cycle.
Yes, but it has to be acknowledged that that vicious cycle worked. That's the craziest part.
No,
It
absolutely, Michael, because that's why we're here talking about it.
Exactly. We're going to talk going back for criminal justice reform. You see, what Trump does is he says what I deem to be the obvious. Our immigration system is broken. Everybody, Republican, Democrat, Independent, will acknowledge that our immigration process is no good. They'll also say that criminal justice, that the Department of Justice, there's all these, the IRS, they are all fucked up as organizations. They just are. You want to get a document by FOIA, good luck to you. And that, by the way, even existed in the Matt Gaetz ethics report. They sent 14 or 15 requests for documents. DOJ said no. Well, we still want to work with you, but we're not giving you the documents yet. We have this to do. We have that to do. I'm going through it for 4.5 years on my case, and they haven't turned over a single document, despite the fact that the judge said that I'm supposed to be on an expedited basis. This is the same where I wrote in my book, Revenge, that literally they claim that there were 0 documents that pertained to my FOIA request. After we sent them the lawsuit showing that there are documents, in fact, I had 4 or 5 of them, they acknowledged they made a mistake and found that there's 486,000 documents that pertain to my request, and asked me if I would even limit the request because there's no way that they could ever comply. Imagine that sort of 0 to 486,000. So when Trump says that it's all fucked up, or we need this, we need that, he's not wrong. It's just the method that he wants to go about the change is the part that's bad. And I bring this question up because, like with the commutation of those 37 federal death row inmate sentences to the pardons to the whole 9 yards, as we're now concentrating and discussing on the 2026 midterm elections with a House and a Senate so close, it's like the numbers are like 1 or 2 seat differences. What do you think that the potential political risks for Democrats as a result of Biden's decision to, say, for example, commute these sentences or give the pardon to his son and to some others? What do you think that the political risk could be calculated as?
I don't think there's a huge, even though I disapproved of the Hunter Biden pardon, And I don't really have an opinion about the commutation of the death row sentences. I have to see the individual cases to really make an assessment. I don't think it's going to have much of a political effect because I think that, the country has the attention span of a gnat. And we are going to see so much happen so quickly that is bizarre and new and different. And people will have forgotten about Joe Biden by February. So I don't see a lasting political impact to any of that. I mean,
you know why I do?
Yeah,
I do. I really think that that the Democrats, we're all playing this all wrong. I wish that they would have reached out to me. I'll tell them why they're doing it wrong. Tell me what you think about this one. Mm-hmm. So while Joe Biden's position is we need to be more humane and these, executions are wrong and so on and so forth, what is Donald Trump saying? He's saying he wants to actually bring back public executions. He wants to maybe create on a channel WWE, Wide World of Executions, fucking Madison Square Garden, right? They're going to have a whole.
But he's going to do that anyway. He's going to do that anyway. The same way he made up the stuff about people eating cats and dogs in Springfield, Ohio. He's going to say what he's going to say, and there are going to be large swaths of the public that find that appealing.
Yes.
And again, that's where we are. And I don't know, frankly, that Joe Biden's going to add or detract from that at this point. I just think people have moved on.
See, what he's going to do is he's going to claim my administration, quite frankly, is all about law and order. We have lost we're a completely dislawed country, and I need to bring it back. And the only way that I can convince John Doe or Jane Doe not to do the things that they're doing, which puts you and your family in jeopardy, is we have to make the penalty so severe that you'd have to be out of your mind, which many of them are, in order to go ahead and to even want to be anywhere near a firearm. Imagine we parade you through Madison Square Garden and then we hang you in front of a whole place.
Yeah, they should. For stealing classified documents, for example, the punishments maybe should be higher. Absolutely.
You're talking about the Code of Hammurabi now, my friend. Yes, off with his hands and so on. So let me ask you this, right? Because there's obviously shifting public opinion on capital punishment. Again, my concern, and I think we need to get ahead of it as Democrats, Trump's push for these harsher penalties. I believe that there is a large swath of society, contemporary society, that views this as a positive thing because he's just going to couch it as being protective for you and your family.
I understand your point. On the other hand, he's been on both sides of this. Remember Jared and his initiative about giving clemency to people prison reform and that kind of thing. They're all over the place. It's just the impulsive randomness of what he does that this all reflects. And nothing is ever going to be pursued to completion. It's like the wall. The wall was like, oh, we're going to build this great wall. And they didn't really ask for very much money for it. And then very little of it ends up getting built. With Trump, it's all showmanship. It's all bullshit. And he's going to make this bullshit about executions at Madison Square Garden or whatever. It's never going to happen. But he's going to mouth off and say these crazy things. And it's not serious. It's not serious governance. It's clownish demagoguery, and a lot of people fall for it.
But and it doesn't stop just there. You may have heard as well that, there's a lot of rhetoric coming out of the, incoming Trump administration about removing, for example, transgender individuals from schools and eliminating critical race theory, which, they have somehow managed to make into a polarizing topic. In fact, he wants to, at that same Arizona conference, or at that rally, he turned around and he said, I want to go back to nothing other than either you're a male or you're a female. There's no more of these they, them, him, this. And again, the crowd went wild. So my question to you is, what do you think of the potential impacts of such policies on, for example, marginalized communities?
Look, I mean, I think it's a classic authoritarian move to pick on and exaggerate the significance of people who are relatively powerless. Okay, because one of the things that draws people to an authoritarian leader, a megalomaniac, is the feeling of being on the team that's powerful and the team that's fighting something and looking for scapegoats to blame the world's their own personal failings or their own personal grievances on. And that's what Trump does, always has done, and always will do. And, it used to be caravans of people coming from South America or Central America, and then it's people eating cats and dogs in Springfield, Ohio, and then it's transgender kids, even though they're very few and far between, and most people aren't affected. 99% of all people aren't affected by it, but they want to talk about it because it allows people to have a scapegoat, right? Something to hate, something to feel angry about. And that's what he does. And that's what people like him do. And that's not serious governance. It's completely counterproductive and creates societal divisions and distracts from the actual work that people should be doing to make the world a better place.
I mean, think about like Nancy Mace walking down the halls of Congress. They have cameras everywhere now. I mean, they must have 10,000 cameras in the halls of Congress. Anytime anybody walks out the door, there's 4 or 5 cameras on anybody. And she's talking about the one incoming member of Congress who's transgender. I'm not going to be. They made an entire thing that occupied people's attention for a week. And you're right. You're talking about one member of Congress. I mean, I just thought.
Yeah, the funny thing is, I mean, like you've been in courthouses and legislative buildings. The legislators don't use the public bathrooms, I don't think, most of the time.
No,
because they have their own private bathrooms in their offices. Okay, I mean, this is all just made up bullshit. I mean, just saying judges. I mean, judges have, a judge wants to change to a tuxedo at a court at his chambers in courthouse. Or in courthouse, he goes into his own. He's got his own private bathroom. I mean, this is what it's all bullshit. I mean, it's all complete.
So
bullshit.
Look, George, the hour goes by very quick. I have one last question for you.
One last question. Okay.
So obviously, Elon Musk is playing a major, major role. There's even on his own social media platform, X, everything trending now is President Musk. We know Donald Trump well. You know him a long time. I know him a long time. How do you think that he's really feeling about all of this? President Musk, Vice President Trump?
He's got to hate it. He's got to hate it. But he bought it. He bought this whole problem. And it's funny. It's because one thing that's sort of ironic and funny about it is he made this deal, but this is one it's going to be harder for him to get out of. Just the same way the Republicans sort of made a deal with the devil in basically deciding that they had to live with Trump. Okay, now they can't get rid of him, right? Mitch McConnell screwed that up. Trump's going to find it hard. This stuff's going to drive Trump crazy. And it already starting to, given the comments from the last couple of days. But he's the one who invited Musk into the House. And he's the one who empowered Musk. And the problem with it is like, he has to face possibility of Musk doing to him what he would do to somebody else that who cast him aside, which is retribution. And Musk has a lot more ability to exact retribution from Donald Trump than Donald Trump actually has for him. He could just bomb the shit out of Trump with ads and things. So Trump's got to be really, really careful. The same way he's probably careful about Putin for some reason. You know, you make a deal with the devil, even the devil makes it. When the devil makes a deal with another devil, you know, not such a great idea.
You know how the saying goes there: be careful when you knock on the door of the devil. Sometimes he answers.
Yeah, exactly. And
well, George,
maybe he's met his match this time.
Who knows?
We'll see.
George,
no, it's gonna be.
We will see.
We will see. And where she stops, nobody knows. And it's you know, I wish it all weren't happening, but you know, it's going to be a spectacle.
Yeah, every day we're going to see chaos. George, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you, my friend. And have a happy holiday to you and to everybody, the whole family. The same. Thank you, brother.
Bye.